Alright, kiddos. Okay, I am going to try and read a little bit more today because we are on chapter 12 and we have a little ways to go till we'll get to the end of the book. So I'm going to try and read a little longer today so that we can get this finished because it's such a great book. I want you guys to know the end. Okay, this is called Peril in the Night. Deadfalls snapped and popped like firecrackers as Hugo pounded through the dark woods. No starlight penetrated the balmy darkness beneath the trees. Hugo maintained an unflagging pace, clutching Coulter under one hand and Seth under the other, like a running back with two footballs. They emerged from the woods briefly and thumped through a covered bridge spanning a deep ravine. Seth recognized it as the same bridge that he had seen when Grandma told him and Kendra to barter, or took him and Kendra to barter with Nero. Not far beyond the bridge, Hugo left the path again, resuming their noisy, loping dash through oblivion. Only the occasional clearing allowed the faint glow of the stars to interrupt the blackness. So remember, Coulter had gone to him in the middle of the night and said, I need a brave soul to come do this with me. And so Seth had left with him. Who thinks that was a good idea? Oh, I don't know. Find out. Seth remained tense, anticipating the appearance of Olaf. At any minute, he expected a supersized glutton to attack Hugo, splitting the night with a ferocious roar. Instead, Hugo continued tirelessly forward, fluidly dodging obstacles. When Hugo reached the top of a steep slope, he charged down without hesitation. Seth felt like he were on the verge of tipping over with every step, but the golem never stumbled. When he reached a dead tree leaning against a cliff, without using his hands, Hugo raced up the rotten trunk like a ramp. Seth's stomach lurched as the ground grew distant, and he felt certain that they would fall. But although the tree creaked beneath them, the golem did not falter. At length they reached a large open valley with a rounded hill at each corner. After the complete darkness of the forest, After the complete darkness of the forest, the starlight proved sufficient to reveal the surrounding terrain. Tall brush covered the ground, mingled with prickly weeds. A dark stand of trees loomed at the far end of the valley, between the two largest hills. Hold on, let me change this. There we go. Hugo bounded across the valley, coming to an abrupt stop near the edge of a shadowy grove. Forward a few more steps, Hugo, Coulter said. The golem leaned forward, trembling. He rocked back, and the shaking stopped. Slowly, Hugo lifted a leg. As he tried to move it forward, he began to shudder, so he was like, trying to move forward. Enough, Hugo, Coulter said. Set us down. What's the deal with Hugo? Seth said. Oh, just as the magical creatures cannot enter the yard back at the house, Hugo cannot enter this grove. There is an unseen boundary here. The ground is cursed. Fortunately, as mortals, we can go wherever we choose. Seth raised his eyebrows. We have to go up against the phantom without Hugo? He said. I expected this, Coulter said, though I would rather have been mistaken. Are we sure we want to go someplace that Hugo can't? This has nothing to do with what we want. This is a matter of duty. I don't want to go in there either, but I must. Seth stared at the dark trees. The night seemed suddenly cooler. He folded his arms. How do you know a phantom is even in there? I did some private reconnaissance. I ventured far enough into the grove to read the signs, and it's clearly the home of a phantom. What sort of a phantom? Coulter pulled up a short, crooked stick from his belt. You hold this holly high. Coulter pulled up a short, crooked stick from his belt. You hold this holly wand high. No matter what happens, keep it above your head. Change hands if you must. I'll take care of the rest. That's all? The holly will protect us when I bind the phantom. No small task, but I've done it once before. The phantom may try to frighten or intimidate you, but if you keep the wand high, we'll both be fine. Now more than ever, whatever you see and hear, you must remain stout-hearted. I can do that, Seth said firmly. What if Olaf shows up? Golems make fabulous gardens, Coulter said. Hugo, keep Olaf the glutton out of the grove. Should I wear my medallion? Oh, the one to repel the undead, by all means put it on. Seth fished the medallion out of his emergency kit and slipped it around his neck. Coulter turned on a heavy flashlight. The initial glare made Seth squint and blink. The bright beam pierced the darkness of the grove, lighting the space between the trees, allowing Coulter and Seth to see much deeper into the ominous woods. Instead of vague, shadowy trunks, the harsh light revealed the color and texture of the bark. There was almost no undergrowth, just rank upon rank of gray pillars supporting a leafy canopy. "Find your courage and hang on tight," Coulter said. "I'm ready," Seth said, holding the holly wand aloft. "Hugo, if we fall, return to the house," Coulter said. "If we fall?" "Just a precaution. We'll be fine." "You're not helping my courage a whole bunch," Seth complained. He started impersonating Coulter. "Seth, we'll be just fine. Nothing to worry about. Hugo, when we die, please have us buried in a beautiful cemetery by a stream. I'm sorry, Seth. I mean, if we die. Be brave. When the phantom kills you, don't scream, even though it's going to hurt a lot." Coulter was smirking. "Are you finished?" "Sounds like we're both finished." "Everyone copes with nerves differently. Humor is among the better ways. Follow me." Coulter stepped forward. Beyond the plain Hugo could not cross, and Seth followed closely. The trees cast long shadows. The flashlight beam swayed back and forth, making the shadows swing and stretch, creating the illusion that the trees were in motion. As they passed the first few trees, Seth glanced back at Hugo, waiting in the shadows. His night vision had already been ruined by the flashlight, so he could barely make out the form of the golem in the darkness. "Can you feel the difference?" Coulter whispered. "Well, I'm scared, if that's what you mean," Seth said softly. Coulter stopped walking. "More than that. Even if you didn't know to be scared, you would be. There's an unshakable sense of foreboding in the atmosphere." Seth had goosebumps on his arms. "You're sort of freaking me out again," he said. "I just want you to be aware of it," Coulter whispered. "It may get worse. Keep that holly wand high." Seth was not sure. It was simply the power of suggestion. But as they resumed walking, with each step the air seemed to grow colder, and the feeling inside seemed to become darker. Seth grimly studied the trees, bracing himself for the terrifying form of a phantom to appear. Coulter slowed and then stopped. The hair rose on the back of Seth's neck. Coulter turned slowly, eyes wide and shimmering. "Uh-oh," he mouthed. The fear hit Seth like a physical blow, making his knees buckle. He dropped his emergency kit as he collapsed to the ground, keeping the hand with the holly wand high. Seth was instantly reminded of when he had sampled Tanu's fear potion. The terror was an irrational, overpowering force. I wonder if you can see the picture. See, he's holding up his wand on the ground. Holly wand. So all of a sudden he's got this fear that's so overpowering that he falls down. He struggled to rise and to keep his hand up. He had made it to his knees and was trying to lift a leg when a second wave of fear washed over him, more powerful than the first, and much more potent than the potion that Tanu had given him. The medallion around his neck dissolved, evaporating into the chilly air. Vaguely, distantly, Seth was aware that the flashlight was on the ground and that Coulter was on his hands and knees quivering. The fear intensified steadily, relentlessly. Seth crumpled. He was on his back. The wand remained above his head, clenched in a frozen fist. His whole body was paralyzed. He tried to call out to Coulter. His lip twitched. No sound came out. He could barely think. This surpassed the fear of death. Death would be a mercy if it would make this feeling stop. The uncontrollable panic mingled with the mind-scrambling certainty of something so sinister approaching. Something with no need to hurry. Something that would not be so kind as to let them die. The fear was palpable, suffocating, irresistible. Seth had always pictured his life ending much more heroically. New part. Kendra snapped awake. The room was dark and silent. She did not often awaken in the middle of the night, but she felt strangely alert. She turned to glance over at Seth. His bed was vacant. She bolted upright. "Seth!" she whispered, scanning the room. There was no sign of her brother. Where could he be? Had the traitor kidnapped him? Had he gone to sacrifice himself to Olaf? Had he taken his gold and left Fablehaven? Maybe he was just using the bathroom. She leaned down and glanced under his bed where he kept his emergency kit. She couldn't see it. Kendra rolled out of bed. She checked more thoroughly, looking under both beds. No emergency kit. Not a good sign. What could he possibly be thinking? Kendra clicked on the light and hurried to the stairs, descending them quickly. Vanessa's room was nearest. Kendra rapped gently and opened the door. Vanessa was curled up under the covers. Kendra tried not to think about the unusual creatures inhabiting the containers stacked around the room. She switched on a light and crossed to the bed. Vanessa rested on her side, facing Kendra. She was perfectly still, except for her eyelids were fluttering wildly like that. Kendra knew from school that Ariane's sleep was a sign of dreaming. The sight was eerie, her face placid, her eyes closed, twitching spasmically. Kendra put a hand on Vanessa's shoulder and shook her. Vanessa, wake up, I'm worried about Seth. The eyelids kept fluttering. Vanessa showed no sign or feeling of hearing Kendra. Shaking Vanessa a second time again elicited no reaction. She couldn't wake her up. Kendra lifted an eyelid. The eye was rolled back in her head, white and bloodshot. Kendra jumped back. The sight creeped her out. There was a half-full cup of water on the nightstand. Kendra hesitated for only a moment. This was an emergency. She poured it on Vanessa's face. Gasping and sputtering, Vanessa sat up, hand clutching her chest, eyes wide, looking not only startled but almost paranoid. She glanced around, eyes darting, clearly disoriented. Her gaze settled on Kendra. What are you doing? She sounded angry and bewildered. Water dripped from her chin. Seth's missing, Kendra said. Vanessa inhaled sharply. Missing? The anger was gone from her voice, replaced by concern. I woke up and he was gone, Kendra said, and so was his emergency kit. Vanessa swung her legs out of bed. Oh no. I hope he hasn't done something awfully rash. Sorry if I sounded harsh. I was having a horrible nightmare. Oh, it's okay. I'm sorry to splash you. I'm glad you did. Vanessa tied on a robe and led them into the hall. You fetch Coulter. I'll get Tanner. Kendra ran down the hall to Coulter's door. She entered after a quick knock. His bed was empty, made up. There was no sign of him. Kendra returned to the hall where Vanessa was leading a blue-eyed Tanner. Where's Coulter? Vanessa asked. He's gone too, Kendra reported. On his back, so now we're back to Seth and Coulter. On his back in the dark, Seth tried to get accustomed to the fear. If he could get used to it, maybe he could resist it. The feeling most reminded him of the sensation you experience when somebody startles you and makes you jump, a burst of terror and panic. Except this feeling was sustained. Instead of coming in a jolt and quickly subsiding into rational relief, the startled feeling not only lingered but got stronger. Seth found it was hard to think, let alone move, so he lay frozen, overwhelmed, inwardly struggling, sensing something drawing closer. His only similar experience has been when Tanu had given the fear potion, although by comparison, that now seemed harmless and diluted. This was the real thing, fear that could kill. Seth, a strained voice said urgently. How did we get here? Unable to turn his head, Seth shifted his eyes. Coulter was laying beside him, leaning up on one elbow. Having something to focus on beside the fear helped, and the fact that Coulter was still able to speak gave him hope. What kind of a pointless question was that? Coulter knew how he'd gotten there. It was his idea. Seth tried to ask what he meant, but managed only a groan. No matter, Coulter grunted. He reached a hand toward Seth, moving like a man on a planet where the gravity was much stronger than Earth, like really slow, like, Take it. Seth could not see what Coulter held. He tried to move his arm, but failed. He tried to sit up, and he failed again. Look, Coulter said. The flashlight was on the ground near his feet. He kicked it softly, changing the angle of the beam. Then Coulter fell flat. With the light turned and Coulter lower to the ground, Seth could now see what was drawing nearer through the trees. An emaciated, raggedy-dressed man with a large thorn protruding from the side of his neck. His skin looked sickly, leprous, with open sores and blotchy discoloration. Because the flashlight was on the ground, the bottom half of the figure was better illuminated than the top. He had knobby ankles. Dried mud rimmed the cuffs of his tattered trousers. Seth steadied his shadowy face. He had a pronounced Adam's apple in his neck right there, and he wore the unnatural smile of a shy man posing for a photograph. The eyes were empty, but uncannily aware. His expression did not change. He was still about 40 feet away, treading slowly as if in a trance. Panting, sweating, Coulter propped himself back up on his elbow. "Revenant!" he growled through clenched teeth. "Talismanic! Uses fear! Remove the nail!" He scooted closer to Seth. "Open mouth!" Seth, so it's like really hard for Coulter to even speak. Seth focused all of his attention to his jaw. He could not stop grinding his teeth. Opening his mouth was not an option. "Can't," he tried to say, but no sound came out. Coulter pressed something into his hand. It felt like a handkerchief. "Warren!" Coulter coughed, barely getting this word out. He tried to say more, but it sounded like he was strangling. Coulter lurched at Seth. Both his hands were on Seth's face. One brusquely jerked his jaw down, and the other thrust something past his lips. When Coulter released him, Seth automatically bit down hard on whatever Coulter had inserted, his jaws clenching involuntarily, flattening the object between his molars. Suddenly, Seth experienced a sensation that his tongue was rapidly inflating. It felt like it had suddenly turned into an emergency airbag exploding out of his mouth. Then his inflated tongue seemed to turn inside out, doubling back and enfolding itself. The stark scene before him instantly vanished. He was shrouded in complete darkness. For the first time since he had begun to feel it, the overwhelming feeling of fear was significantly reduced. He could move again. He was inside spongy darkness, totally encased by something. Seth touched his tongue. It was intact, normal. His tongue had not actually ballooned. It must have been whatever Coulter had crammed into his mouth. The cocoon! That was the only explanation. Somehow Coulter had found the strength to shove his failsafe into Seth's mouth. Seth pressed against the confining walls of the snug enclosure. They felt soft at first, but when he pressed hard, they did not bulge. According to what Coulter had said, nothing could get to him now. He could survive for months. Coulter, the older man, had sacrificed himself. Though it was now muted, Seth could still feel fear increasing. Somewhere beyond the pillowy darkness enfolding him, the creature was nearing Coulter. Even he would be petrified by now, no matter how resistant he was to the smothering fear. It had seemed like he'd used his last strength to give away his cocoon. Seth examined the object Coulter had placed in his hand. It was not a handkerchief. It was a glove with no fingertips. Presumably the glove that Coulter had used to turn invisible. It would not come in handy inside the cocoon, but if he ever got out, it could certainly prove useful. Seth squeezed the glove. There could only be one reason that Coulter had passed it to him. The older man did not expect to survive. Coulter started screaming. Although the sounds were muffled by the cocoon, Seth had never heard such unrestrained expressions of pure terror. Seth resisted the impulse to start tearing the cocoon apart. He wanted to help, but what could he do? Coulter did not scream for long. Grandpa sat on the edge of his cot, surrounded by Vanessa, Dale, Tanny, Grandma, and Kendra. His hair was sticking up in a way Kendra had never seen, but his hard eyes were not sleepy. "The traitor is unmasked," Grandpa said to himself. "Not Coulter," Grandma said in disbelief. "They're gone," Tanny said. "He took his gear, Seth took his kit. Glancing at his tracks, it looks like Hugo carried them." "Can you follow them?" Grandpa asked. "Easily," Tanny said. "But they have a good start on us, and Hugo is not slow." "What do you suppose he's up to?" Vanessa asked. Grandpa glanced wearily at Kendra. "We'll discuss that later." "No," Kendra said. "Go ahead. We have to hurry." "Coulter is missing an essential object for uncovering the lost relic," Grandpa said, "right?" Grandma nodded. "We still have it." "I can only imagine that he has some reason for offering Seth to Olak," Grandpa said. "It does not strike me as very strategic, which is unlike Coulter. He may know something we don't." "Time is wasting," Dale said. "Right," Grandpa agreed. "Dale, Vanessa, Tanu, find where Coulter took Seth, recover Seth and Hugo. The three of them ran out of the house. Kendra heard them thumping around the house, or ran out of the room. Kendra heard them thumping around the house collecting gear. She stood still, stunned. Was this really happening? Was her brother really gone, kidnapped by a traitor? Was Coulter really going to feed him to Olak? Or did Coulter have something unforeseeable in mind? Seth might already be dead. Her mind recoiled at the thought. No, he had to be alive. Tanu and Vanessa and Dale would rescue him. As long as she had any room to hope, she would not lose faith. Is there anything I can do? Kendra asked. Grandma rubbed her shoulders from behind. Try not to worry. Vanessa, Tanu, and Dale will find him. Do you think he'd go back to bed? Grandpa asked. Not likely, Kendra said. I've never felt more awake, and I've never wished more that I was dreaming. Alright, so now we're back to Seth again. Merciless silence followed the end of Coulter's cries. Seth could not tell if it was an after effect of his screaming, but the fear seemed to be intensifying again, welling up inside him. Something jostled Seth's cocoon, again and again. Seth pictured the gaunt man with the lank hair and the unphotogenic smile rocking the cocoon. He can't get in, he can't get in, he can't get in, Seth repeated softly to himself. The fear was leveling off. It was uncomfortable, but bearable after what he just sampled outside of the cocoon. What could he do now? He was trapped. Sure, the zombie man couldn't get in, but Seth couldn't get out either. The instant he ripped open the cocoon, he would become vulnerable. So it was a standoff. He would have to wait to be rescued. A roar interrupted his thinking. It sounded distant, though it was difficult to be sure how much of that was the cocoon. Seth waited, listening. The next roar was definitely closer. He knew the sound. It was deeper and fuller in a way that implied bigger, that it was certainly Olak. Seth heard another fierce roar, and another. What was going on? A showdown with Hugo? What would happen if Olak got into the grove? If Olak had the potential to become as powerful as Bahamut, strong enough to overthrow the foundational treaty of FABLEHAVEN, wasn't it possible that the demon could become stronger than the cocoon? All Seth could do was wait in the close, soft confines of his enclosure, ignoring whenever it was shaken by the zombie. Hold on. Hold on a sec. We're almost done with this paragraph. All Seth could do was wait. Actually, Coulter had called the creature a revenant, whatever that meant, not a zombie. Apparently, he'd been mistaken about the grove being home to a phantom. Coulter had said to remove the nail, which had to be the thorn-like thing on the side of the revenant's neck. Easier said than done. Hard to pull out a nail when a fear you can't control has you frozen solid. An ear-splitting roar caught Seth unprepared. He flinched, covering his ears. It sounded like Olak was right outside the cocoon. And then Seth was harshly flung about. It felt like the cocoon had been catapulted into a web of bungee cords. He was grateful that the snug interior was padded. After Seth had been whipped about until he was unsure which direction was up, the cocoon started to settle to a stop. A moment later, he felt the cocoon again start moving linearly. Then it stopped. Then it started again. The motion was a lot smoother now. It felt like the cocoon was in the back of a pickup truck that kept accelerating and decelerating and turning and occasionally hopping. It had not taken long for Seth to figure out what it meant. Olak had swallowed him, cocoon and all. Oh, my Nelly. We got all the way through chapter 12. Can't wait to see what happens next.